So, anime or fiction in general sometimes makes reference to this place called Tartarus. In My Hero Academia, a wonderful prison goes by this name, and over in Fairy Tail, Tartarus is the name of an organization consisting of demons. But what is Tartarus itself? What are these shows referring to? Hey, it's Tripl-L, and welcome to this video where we talk about Tartarus. There's tons of shows that make reference for it, but for simplicity, we'll just use these two as the featured anime and as the jump off points. So what is Tartarus? Well, Tartarus actually refers to one that is simultaneously two. In classical mythology at its origin point, Tartarus refers to both an entity and a place. As a place, Tartarus was the darkest, deepest, helliest of hells. You know Hades from Hercules, like the movie? You know, the Greek version of hell? The ancient Greek author Homer wrote that Tartarus was way below Hades. It was about the same as the distance between heaven and earth was the distance between Hades and Tartarus. It was pretty much an abyssal dungeon like no other, although later writers called it an equivalent to Hades, pretty much put it at the same place, such that Hades and Tartarus became interchangeable with one another. In context of its home mythology, Tartarus was the place where Big Daddy Zeus trapped the Titans, who were pretty much the offspring of the heaven and the earths, and they were offspring of incredible power, and they were chaotic like a hurricane. Those guys, Zeus just kind of shoved them in there, and Tartarus was a place that was strong enough to hold these embodiments of nature. Depending on other stories, other errant gods showed up in there too, along with some errant humans. In more general mythological sense, Tartarus was the place where gods sent the exceptionally depraved individual. So if a deity was to tell you there's a special place in hell for you, they probably meant Tartarus. Because Tartarus had the special characteristic of being able to personalize its punishment just for you. So it would make sure that you would have the worst possible punishment you personally were owed. Some examples of the punishments that the inmates had to go through in Tartarus included things like never being able to sate your hunger or quench your thirst. For instance, there was a man who was made to stand in a puddle right below a apple tree or a fruit tree. If he reached for the fruit would recede and would go higher than he could reach. If he reached down to drink some water, the water level would go down so that he couldn't get any water. It was the punishment of having everything you want right in front of you but not being able to touch it. Another story had an instance where a person was made to roll a rock up a hill, but whenever he would get to the top, the rock would just kind of roll down, and then, you know, had to start the whole process over again. It was a pretty sadistic place. So how does that connect back to the featured anime? Well, let's start with Fairy Tail. Fairy Tail featured the more superficial referencing the name and the idea of Tartarus being the equivalent of Hades or being the equivalent of hell. Tartarus in Fairy Tail is a guild. It is a place, it is a gathering point for demons. Hell is infested with demons, so having a guild of demons being named Tartarus made sense. Meanwhile, in Hero Academia, Tartarus is a prison, which already obvious connections to the original Tartarus, but Hero Academia went a step further with its reference, explaining why exactly the prison was called Tartarus, thanks to our resident savvy but very brutal and dangerous villain, All For One. He drew the parallels between how deep the prison was underground to justify why this place had been named Tartarus. He even went a step further and pointed out that there was a god that also had the same name, also quipping that he would be facing harsh times if he rebelled against gods, which is a reference to what happened to the humans that were sent to Tartarus in general. They were sent there because the gods found them too egregious. It is also worth noting that this prison is designed to hold people who death is too good for, so it does follow up with the idea of Tartarus being a hell beyond hell that punishes someone eternally, instead of just letting them get the easy way out with a peaceful death. Ultimately, between the two shows, Fairy Tail has the more typical reference, that being a reference just in name only, doesn't really explain it to you. Hero Academia went a little bit further and just talked about why exactly the name exists for this place in the story. But about Tartarus the entity. The reason it's a bit more complicated with Tartarus the entity is because Tartarus is a primordial entity, meaning that he represented a fundamental concept of reality. Tartarus itself represented the concept of hell. To put it into perspective, Tartarus was in the ranks of concepts such as time, heaven, earth, and night, all concepts that had a deity representing it. You could argue whether or not hell is a fundamental concept for our reality, but for the case of the story, you can think of it as the being that represents the idea of a place that sinners go to pay for their crimes. Another thing that gave Tartarus more human-like characteristics was, depending on the story, Tartarus was the father of Echidna and Typhon, who they themselves, between themselves, parented many classical monsters like the Hydra. You might be wondering, wait, does that mean they were incestuous? And it's like, yes, insanely. They were insanely incestuous. It's Greek mythology. But I do want to point out, it's better not to think of it as relations between genetics. It's better to think of it as a relation between concepts. Okay, on that note, let's not continue this conversation about Tartarus and the kids that he had with his mother. No. Like, this is pretty much over. Like, we pretty much covered what I wanted to cover about Tartarus. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I like mythology, and I want to do more videos covering it. So I very much hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope you found something informative. And yeah, let's call it there. Till next time. I hope you have an absolutely great day.